Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host. And today's title is USA Gun Culture versus Gun Access and Use. When I was coming up with the title for this show, and certainly the concept for the show, we had a gentleman, a young 16-year-old boy named Ralph Yarl, who knocked on the wrong door in Kansas City. And he was going to pick up his brother, and he was shot without words exchanged. He was shot on the porch of another gentleman. And since then, we had a young lady who was shot because they dared take the wrong driveway, and they're trying to turn around, and she was shot and killed. And then, as of today, we had two cheerleaders in Texas. They were in a shopping parking lot, and inadvertently they went in the wrong car. I've done that. I've gotten in the wrong car before. And she tried to explain and tried to apologize, and she was shot. So here we are. We have gun violence again, over and over again. And with us today, we have our special esteemed guests, Chuck Crumpton, and our co-host, Jay Fidell. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Tim.
Jay.
Morning, Chuck.
Chuck, to you. What does our gun culture look like in America right now? And how did we get to a point where we have more guns than we do population? I think right now our population in the United States around 315 million. We have more guns than that. We have every gun for every man, woman, and child in this country. What do you think?
Oh, hard to choose words. Hey, in one word, scary. It's scary for everybody. For the people who are afraid to go outside, it's gotten ridiculous. Jogging while black, knocking on the wrong door while black, pulling into the wrong driveway while white. Where does it stop? Of all the issues out there, and as upsetting as they all are, this one, to me, should make us much angrier and more resolved to insist on remedial action than any of the others.
Well, I blame Trump. I blame Trump for creating a divisive atmosphere in this country. And I blame that atmosphere on moving to violence. And I blame the NRA and the people who emboldened the NRA over the past few years. And I also, my initial thought from your question is, this is on the way to war. It's on the way to civil war. It's where you can't go out anymore, that everybody's armed and everybody's ready to shoot the other guy. And I think that's where we are. This is part of the divisiveness in the country, and it will get worse. And it doesn't really require a difference of opinion or ideology, just the slightest excuse for violence, and there you have it. So I think we're on a continuum, and the continuum is being expressed now daily in the news. It's like every day there's a shooting, a knifing, a murder of one kind or another. And it's only going to continue into a conflagration around the country.
Let me share a Gallup poll here. This was taken in August 2019, so it's a little antiquated, but for rationale why people owned weapons, 63% it was for personal protection. 40% said hunting. 11% said it's usually a passed down from as a family heirloom. And then 5% said it's required in their line of work. Anything of those numbers strike you at all odd or something you would expect?
You're asking me. I think those are all bad reasons. Those are all euphemistic. They're all excuses. We don't need 400 million guns, and I verified that number, by the way, Tim. 400 million guns in this country. We don't need them. We can get along without them. Other countries get along without them. Why do we have to have everybody packing a sidearm and carrying a rifle and having an assault weapon? all of that is really unnecessary. If you took all the guns away, as they did in Australia and New Zealand, you would have a lot less violence. Guns.
Well, 63% is a fairly high number for personal protection. Let me play devil's advocate here. If someone's breaking down your door, what are you going to do?
You know, the whole story
You can call the
about
police and
personal
hope they get
protection
there faster than the person who's broken down your door?
The whole story of personal protection is euphemistic. There's really no reason to have a gun for personal protection. Just, close your door, man, and be careful and call the police. And hopefully the police will respond appropriately. But I think the notion of having a gun in your bedstand is ridiculous. It only heightens the risk of murder. It makes you more of a target. It makes the guy who broke into your house more of a risk for you. You're not good at it. I mean, maybe you are, Tim, maybe you are, Chuck, but I think most people, they're not going to handle it well. And they could wind up shooting the guy, and then they are going to get indicted. I mean, really, what is the point? So if you count, of course, this is something we could ask GBT, couldn't we? If you count the number of people who actually protect themselves by having guns, it's minuscule. That's a dream. That's fiction. And I think if we took all the guns away, we wouldn't have this problem. But unfortunately, there are those in this country, and there are those capital and business interests who want to keep the guns, and therefore we have the guns. And guns equal the use of guns, and the use of guns equals violence and death and murder. So I don't think we need them, and I don't think they're useful for self-defense.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Hey, Chuck, in a lot of states, they've passed in recent years a law called Stand Your Ground. And it seems to be that this Stand Your Ground law gives pretty much anyone the right to shoot anybody for the minimal of reasons. In addition to Stand Your Ground law, there is the castle law, which has been in place for decades of one sort of another in some form or another, where it basically says that someone comes in your house, you do have the right to defend yourself and your family and potentially shoot them. I know in certain states it says breaking down the door is not enough. You have to be in mortal fear of your life, actually see a weapon in their hand and so forth. So let me get your reaction to Stand Your Ground laws that over 30 states now have this in place, and whether or not that law is just an invitation for people to shoot people. And I'm sure that in the case of Ralph Yarl, the 85-year-old gentleman who shot him without cause will probably use that as his defense. Your reaction?
Stand Your Ground law, which should more appropriately be called in your face law, it comes from the same place as the 63% of Americans in your poll that claim that they have guns for self-protection. Wouldn't be there except for our utter ineffectiveness, inability, and unwillingness to establish effective control over the wrong people having and using guns for the wrong purpose. There would be no need for that 63%. There would be no need for any kind of Stand Your Ground law. The Stand Your Ground law was used effectively by Zimmerman also to assassinate a young black man. And I'll use that word not advisedly.
Well,
it's
Jay mentioned that
people. That's not self-protection.
Yeah, he was defenseless, and same with the two cheerleaders. I mean, allegedly, I haven't read the full article as yet, but allegedly she raised her hand and started apologizing profusely. Then she was shot. And the other party didn't even get a chance to say a word. They just tried to turn around the car, and they were shot. And a 20-year-old woman was killed in trying to turn around in the car. So let me get to this. I mean, Jay had mentioned he blames the Trump administration. Didn't Trump and his administration try to fan the flames of fear when it came to crime in the cities and crime in the suburbs, and they're coming for you? I mean, I remember that refrain over and over again. Did that seem to have some impact on people that didn't own guns before but now do? That's
been a GOP mantra for a long, long time. since Reagan. Jim Jordan tried it in New York recently against Alvin Bragg. Didn't work very well. Fortunately, despite all of those really offensive tactics, which are without factual or legal basis or moral basis in most instances, the GOP has consistently in its leadership demonstrated a complete lack of any judgment in who they pick to anger and to fight with. So, maybe there's a balancing element out there, but no, there's no excuse for that.
Well, something must be motivating people because gun sales are going through the roof again. And I know there's a correlation between anytime a politician, particularly the Democrats, talk about banning assault weapons. My God, the gun shops can't keep them in stock fast enough. They sell off the shelves and at a higher price. So what is it there's a fear factor in there somewhere. Is it the fear factor that I won't be able to own my AR-15 or that I need an AR-15 because there's increasing crime? Chuck?
I think Jay is right. I think the direction that the country has been going, legislative, judicially, the voters and the consumers have zeroed in on the necessity of guns as an inalienable, and not only that, an unrestrictable universal right. Any kind of gun you want to have, no matter how much damage and harm an automatic weapon can do. There's no need for that. You don't need that for hunting. You don't take down deer with an AK-47. So,
Jay, okay, thank you, Chuck. Jay, to you about the same question about stand your ground laws or the Castle Doctrine. Do you think these recent laws that have been enacted has increased gun violence?
Oh, absolutely. Because people don't really understand the limits to stand your ground or those other statutes. And they think, well, this will excuse me, justify me, give me a defense when they take me to court. And so they feel enabled. It's really problematic because, so you hear somebody turn the lock in your front door one night, and you turn to your wife and you say, where did I put the AR-15 again? I can't remember where I put it. Okay, she tells you where. And then you say, where did I put the magazine and the bullets? And how do you actually put the magazine into the AR-15? And how do I take the safety off? And how do I actually shoot the thing at the guy who's trying to get in? By that time, the guy is in. And if he has a gun and he sees you messing with an AR-15, he's going to shoot you as much as he possibly can. What kind of self-defense is that? Most people don't know how to use it anyway, and they only exacerbate the situation by trying. The whole thing, may I say, the picture you guys are describing is madness. Congress doesn't care. The Republicans don't care. The Supreme Court wants to make it worse. The NRA wants to make it worse. The base and Trump folks, they want to make it worse. So who actually is taking steps to make it better? Nobody. And that's why it's out of control. That's why it's getting worse all the time. That's why there's more violence in this country day to day, week to week. And as I said before, it's not just guns. It's violence. It's knives. It's machetes. It's driving your car into a crowd. It's like we've been unleashed into this kind of civil war where everybody does violence on violence. And I have a theory about that. If you give me a little time, I'll tell you what it is.
Well, let's go with that because you and I, before we discussed this topic, we talked about the decades and decades of increasing violence, both on TV shows and movies. And now it's difficult at best to find a show that doesn't involve a lot of violence. So let's go down that road.
I want to assure you guys that Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, and Ginger Rogers did not make violent movies. Even Hopalong Cassidy.
Or Ethel Merman.
Or Ethel Merman. Even Hopalong Cassidy was not all that violent. Roy Rogers was not all that violent. And there was a message, and the message was that good guys win. And what we have now is a complete, 180. I mean, 180 is the wrong term. What we have is a violent cornucopia spilling out us from the tube on really every channel. I mentioned to you when we spoke, Tim, that it's on all the movies for Netflix and Prime, but it's also on the networks. It's also on those repeating shows like East New York, and I don't know how many others there are coming on. And what sells is the violence. The people in this country, the viewing audience wants to see it, and the movie makers, the network, serial makers, and the series people who make these movies are making them about violence. There isn't a frame of these movies where you can't turn on the movie and see a gun and see somebody shooting the gun and killing somebody. It's extraordinary how much. And furthermore, we have these junior Hollywoods all around the world who emulate our Hollywood, who emulate these very same movies. So what you have is it's a lesson to people who may not be completely educated in world affairs and in community affairs, where they believe that violence is justified. They believe that if you get shot and your body is torn apart by some assault weapon, you can go to the hospital and have this miraculous recovery. And so it depends on whether you're a good character or a bad character. But if you're the right character, you can survive. It's amazing how that works. And the lessons are there every single day. They've been there for years. And they've been, they run the same gamut as Trump's civil war. And so what I get is a lot of people in this country feel that guns are part of the American culture. You have to do this. You have to buy a gun, use a gun. You have to know how to, pull the trigger. And when you get upset and angry, and when you're frustrated over the world around you, hey, pull the trigger, or run your car into a crowd, or use a knife and do some sort of horrible attack on people. I think America has changed.
Well, didn't Hollywood try to address that with the rating systems? M for mature, V for violence. Isn't the rating systems not the problem? It's the parents that allow the children to watch anything and all the above. I mean, where do we start with violence in our society and the portrayal of violence? Isn't it the parents that allow it to happen from a very young age?
Oh, well, you can say that, but the parents are watching too. Everybody's watching. That's what's out there. That's what's on the screen, and it is captivating. It is interesting. It is attractive in its own bizarre way. So I don't know if the parents are a solution. The parents don't know the difference in most families, and the rating system, whatever it is, isn't working to the extent that it even still exists. And everybody sits around the tube, with the bonbons and the popcorn, watching these murders every day, all night, especially in the time of COVID, where we have more television and less other things to do. And the result is we take on this imprimatur of what they're selling us. And I see no end to this. I don't think Hollywood is going to stop making these movies. These movies make huge money. There was something on the news yesterday having to do with Netflix, and they don't have as many subscribers as they want, but their quarterly profit is in the billions. It's really interesting. And by the way, the Fox News quarterly profit is also in the billions. There's an interesting correlation to that. They're making tons of money with the violence. You think they're going to stop? You think that Fox News is going to stop? They're making a lot of money. So I mean, the whole thing is out of control. Government is doing nothing, and predictably, Chuck, there's no process on the horizon that suggests in any way this is going to change.
All right. So, Chuck, about a year and a half ago, Congress actually, in a rare moment, came together and did pass some legislation that tried to limit gun access, tried to enhance what we call as red flag laws. But that was it. It was notable, but it certainly wasn't all that effective. Is there ever another chance here in the Biden administration to take another crack at trying to enhance our gun restriction laws? Your opinion?
I have a two-word answer to that, Kevin McCarthy. Maybe 4 words. Kevin and the MAGA GOP, right? But no, I mean, he has no control over those guys. He can't get enough votes to pass anything, but he has just enough votes against stuff in the House to be able to prevent the Democrats from accomplishing serious gun reform. Chris Murphy, to his credit, managed to put together just enough of a coalition of people, and they watered the bill down, and it took out stuff on prohibiting automatic weapons and stuff, assault weapons and things like that. All that came out. So the things that got passed in the bill were fairly token. The other question is whether they're really enforced at the state and local levels. Not in most cases. So Jay is exactly right. The GOP has managed to engender a nuclear base that operates on fear and greed. And you don't have to call people like that deplorables. Their conduct and their attitudes speak for themselves. But we're not going to get change unless and until grassroots people put together effective groups and accomplish it at local, regional, and state levels. It's not going to happen at the national level in the foreseeable future. Congress has been dysfunctional for decades and will continue to be. It's amazing that they were able to pass some economic measures that have actually had some real benefit for the people who need it the most. In guns,
well, there was, if I recall the time before the passage of these red flag laws and some access laws, about a year and a half ago in Congress, there was a lot of outrage in all 50 states. To what degree of outrage would be required to get a second round of congressional look at gun restrictions? Is there any sense of outrage enough to motivate the GOP to take another peek?
Quote from the Tennessee legislator after the Nashville shootings: "We're not going to fix it." That's the Republican position. It ties to the money, it ties to the NRA, it ties to major donors, ties to Trump. They're afraid to put those at risk in the same way that Fox was afraid to lose viewers by putting the truth about the 2020 election on the air.
Well, let me add a thought on that. You know, we have an increasing amount of shooting, and you were talking before the show, Tim, about how the emergency rooms in this state, even in this state, are increasing in their business by violence and violent injuries and deaths. It's really extraordinary how this is all working to a fevered pitch. And the press, I don't know what Fox News is doing about it. I'm sure it's not honest reporting, but the MSNBC and the CNN, they report these raw meat stories about people getting killed and maimed and murdered all day. And they repeat it. You know, the Nashville incident, Chuck, you know, that they had like 10 days of press exclusively around that. And then those guys, in the Tennessee legislature gave them another 10 days. Boy, that's what we study in this country. You would think that the metric increase in violence would have an effect in Congress. That the people would rise up and say, enough, this is crazy. This is national insanity. You would think that. But the countervailing metric is this makes us all the more scared. And this makes the NRA and the base and and the Trumpers' argument that we need to, quote, defend ourselves, and we need the state legislatures to help us defend ourselves, it makes those arguments even more cogent. So what you have is, on the one side, the increase in violence, that should be a factor for Congress and state legislatures to take action. But on the other side, the argument is so deep-seated that we need to have guns to, quote, defend ourselves. What you were talking about before is that works against it. So the bottom line is it sort of neutralize each other. And at the end of the day, we wind up in favor of fear and more guns and more violence. So we're not going to a good place.
So what I hear is a very well described situation of gridlock, both on the social end of things and certainly in Congress. Any way of breaking the gridlock? We're down to a couple minutes. So just your last thoughts on that point.
I'll give you mine, and then Chuck can give you his. But I guess that it's going to become obvious that the country is at war with itself. It's going to become obvious that you can't walk on the street and drive up the wrong driveway, knock on the wrong door, and all those things. That your life is at risk in this country more than ever, more than ever. Since the Revolutionary War, we have never had it like this. And it's really insane. There's no other way to put it. So I think that ultimately the hope for us is, it's terrible to say this, the hope for us is we have so much violence that people do rise up and say, gee whiz, you guys haven't done anything to help. And people are getting shot and killed all day long. We need to change, our view of things. We need to change our legislators. Whether that happens in our lifetimes, and I hope we're all safe in our lifetimes, or not, is the open question. Because right now, I don't know if the younger generation, who might run for office and take a whack at this issue, is strong enough or aware enough to actually raise the alarm.
Right. Chuck, you want to tackle that as well?
Well, look, even where state and local legislative groups try to enact gun laws to prohibit guns in so-called sensitive places, the one little possible loophole in the Supreme Court decision that basically gave unfettered right and discretion to people to have and take guns anywhere. Remember, Warren Burger, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, after his retirement, said the greatest fraud in American law was the misinterpretation of the Second Amendment to justify unfettered gun ownership and use. That's not what the Second Amendment meant. That's a conservative justice's interpretation based on decades of experience in the law and the Constitution. We're a long way from that. But we're not there because of legal reasons. We're there because of political reasons. And when the courts won't restrict gun rights, it's not going to help much for the legislatures to try and do that. It's got to come from the grassroots. It's got to come from the people.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. We've run out of time, so I'd like to thank our special esteemed guest, Chuck Crumpton, and as always, our co-host, Jay Fidell. Won't you join us next week for American Issues Take One? I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and we'll see you then. Aloha.
We live in a country of increasing gun violence. Most people are astounded that we have so much gun violence. But the gun manufacturers and the NRA want it that way. The Republicans want it that way. Trump's base wants it that way. Congress apparently also wants it that way. The most outrageous gun violence takes place day after day and week after week in this country, and they do nothing. The Supreme Court is dedicated to making things worse. The will of the people means nothing. But there's more. There's the media and its sidekick friend, the movies. The media reports heavily and continually on every incident of gun violence, publicizing it day after day and effectively glorifying the shock of it. It definitely sells ads, you see. And there's a kind of blur between the raw meat news reporting on gun violence incidents and the movie industry. Yes, that includes all of Hollywood, and for that matter, the copycat Hollywoods making American-like movies around the world. And of course, the enormous number of stay-at-home COVID cable movies into which Netflix and Prime are pouring billions of capital investment. Turn on the TV, and you won't have to wait even for seconds before you see the characters, good and bad, shoot each other. The good guys shooting the bad, and the bad guys shooting the good, the Bonnie and Clyde anti-heroes shooting everyone else, for their perverse sense of justice or vengeance, for the technology and phallic power of today's guns. Gun violence through the movie. Every scene, if not every frame, people threatening, shooting, dying, and being ripped apart by ever more powerful guns. We watch, and that is on us. Why we watch is another bizarre question. Fascination with the magic of modern medicine that can save us even when our insides are blown apart. Awe in the face of the technology inherent in ghost guns and assault rifles that can kill hundreds before anyone can stop them. We sit on our potato couch day after day, enjoying the hate, the vengeance, the violence, all arguably protected by the First and Second Amendment. All things considered, our non-action is really insane. There's no immediate answer, but maybe one solution is to take a fresh look at the use of guns in our public entertainment and try to get some kind of rational handle on that.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.